The first thing I actually did for this wasn't in Blender, but in GIMP, and that was to create a black and white water caustics image. You know, the ripply light patterns that water creates. Once I did that, I made a bumpy plane for my ground, and then in the Cycles engine, I used that same water caustics image in the shader editor of a spotlight to project it onto the ground, with a slight blue tint to the color. Then I brought in a cube to cover the whole scene and put a pretty simple volumetric shader on it to have the light refract around like you're underwater. This not only gives the water version of atmospheric occlusion, but it also creates the God Ray effect. To make the seaweed backdrop, I took a mesh plane, extruded it up a bit, kind of randomly, and then gave it a couple subdivisions and put a displacement modifier on it. The displacement was keyed to an empty that I animated slowly going up over the course of the entire scene, which caused the seaweed to wiggle. Then, instead of duplicating it with Shift-D, I duplicated it with Alt-D, which works a little differently and makes them to where they're all technically one object, kind of, sorta, essentially. It makes it a little easier to render, and they all share the same properties, so you don't have to manually change the color or edit the mesh on all of them. After that, I added in the two main structure chunks, and then I made these little two polyp underwater slime gubbin thingies, along with a couple other baubles to scatter around the scene. I textured the structures to be a rock and kind of coral bone swoop thing, and then made a couple more rocks scattered around. Then I made some shelf corals, scattered it around. Then I used weight painting on the structures to create a area where I would use a hair modifier to scatter both the tubes and a more conventional hair structure to make kind of a red seagrass type deal. After that, I made some more tree-like coral and scattered it around in the back, assigning it to its own collection, like I did with the tubes, so I could also scatter it around with a different hair modifier here in a second. I added in another weight paint controlled hair modifier on the floor to add some more red seagrass around. Then I put in a plane beneath everything that's just a little bit smaller than the floor to release a stream of metaballs upwards, which would act like bubbles. And I did that with a particle system with negative gravity. Then for the last little bit, I made a jellyfish cap and then used dynamic hair for the tentacles. Then I fiddled with its animation for a while and then let the whole scene render overnight.